I enjoy spray painting and have decent skills with a can in hand. However, the tagging community is quite toxic. Artists often lack respect for one another and are generally unfriendly. As a result, I've developed a more discreet routine, choosing quieter spots where my art is less likely to be seen by others, including fellow artists. Old train lines are ideal since there are endless train cars, and new ones are frequently decommissioned and left to decay. My friend Marvin often joins me, even though he isn't deeply invested in tagging. I appreciate his company. It's sad that some people don't recognize the value of a good friend. Most of my other friends don't seem to respect my time or interests as much as he does. One evening, Marvin and I found ourselves smoking on a set of old tracks I had discovered earlier that day on Google Maps. While I'm not a frequent smoker, I tend to indulge when I'm with Marvin, who smokes a lot of weed. It was a little past 10 p.m. when we finished a joint and began walking alongside an old, rusty freight train. Oddly, there wasn't a single tag on the train. Excited at the prospect of being the first to paint on such a clean surface, I tossed Marvin a spray can and started working on my own tags. After about 15 minutes and 2 cans, I was proud of the 3 decent tags I had created next to each other. I admit I tend to discard my empty cans wherever I finish using them, so I flung the cans back the way we had come, enjoying the satisfying clatter of the ball bearing inside. I then caught up with Marvin, who had rolled and lit another joint while neglecting the paint I had given him. For context, I'm not a big stoner because I often experience intense anxiety when high, about 90% of the time. In hindsight, smoking 2 joints with Marvin was a questionable choice, especially since we were already engaging in an illegal activity, which heightened my anxiety. Nevertheless, I decided to smoke the second joint, believing I would be okay. Suddenly, we heard a muffled clang from behind us. We froze, staring into the darkness as sweat formed around my neck and adrenaline coursed through me. I couldn't tell if the sound came from inside the train or from outside, and both options felt threatening. We waited in silence for a full minute, but nothing happened. Then I took out my phone and recorded a video. In the video, you can see someone picking up one of my empty paint cans and throwing it at us before chasing and shouting after us. Although you can't see the can in the video, I assure you that's what made the initial noise. As we fled, the person behind us yelled, "You better not trip, boy." Moments later, a gunshot rang out, startling Marvin and nearly causing him to fall. The shock made me slip my finger off the record button on Snapchat, cutting off the video. We ran down the tracks until we reached a main road, not stopping until we felt safe. I don't think I've ever been more terrified. The fact that I was stoned only amplified my fear. My hands were literally shaking. So were Marvin's. Once we reached my car, we drove home in silence. What could I do? Call the police? I was breaking the law. That wasn't an option. However, the story didn't end there. A few weeks later, I returned to those tracks during the day, armed with my trusty Glock 17. To my surprise, the train was still there, but 3 spots where my tags had once been were now covered with ugly blotches of red paint. Someone had deliberately obliterated my work. Continuing my exploration, I found a train car with its door wide open. Inside, I discovered an empty space except for a chair in the center and scattered ropes and chains. Some ropes were wrapped around the chair's legs, while others lay on the floor. The most unsettling part was the overpowering smell of bleach, as if the entire car had been drenched in it. As I reached for my phone to take a picture, I heard a metal clang further down the train. Whether it was real or my imagination, I didn't want to find out. I left quickly. I've shared this story with many people, but none could rationalize the actions of that person. I doubt a homeless person would have access to a gun, but I can't fathom why anyone else would respond so aggressively or why they'd choose to cover up my tags. The most disturbing aspect was the chair in the middle of the train car. I want to return to take a picture of what I saw, but I haven't found the courage. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone with my thoughts, I still hear that gunshot echoing in my ears. As I write this in early July, I reflect on the events of that summer. I usually travel to Europe or stay in my college town to avoid going home, but this year was different. I reluctantly returned home at the beginning of summer, counting down the days until my flight to Germany. I didn't feel like reconnecting with old friends, nor did I want to stay home, so I spent my days hiking, watching movies, or driving aimlessly. On my last day home, boredom set in, and I craved excitement. My friends and I used to train hop, a reckless activity I had long since abandoned. So I decided to drive to a secluded set of tracks I knew about, surrounded by trees and flora, perfect for avoiding detection while engaging in illegal activities. I parked my car and approached the tracks, which ran through the trees before entering a tunnel. On the other side was a vast bridge over the water. My friends and I used to ride the train across, but alone. I risked getting stranded without a way back unless I walked 10 miles. I resolved to hop on the train, ride through the tunnel, and then walk back to my car. After waiting for about 10 minutes, I felt the familiar vibration of an approaching train. I quickly moved aside to stay out of sight. Once the train passed, I waited for a good number of cars to go by before emerging from my hiding spot. I picked a car that looked easily accessible and jogged alongside the train, grabbing the ladder and swinging myself up. The train was moving slowly, and as it entered the tunnel, I noticed a strange flash of light ahead. It looked like a spark, but I had never seen anything like it before. Just as I began to worry about potential hazards in the tunnel, I felt a hand reach out from the darkness and grab my leg. I nearly slipped, but managed to hold on. I screamed and kicked, but the train sped by before I could make contact. Before I could process what had just happened, another hand slapped against my leg. I scrambled up the ladder, heart racing. As the train exited the tunnel, I jumped off without thinking and watched it cross the bridge. Pacing back and forth in the clearing, I wondered who or what was in the tunnel and why they tried to grab me. Then it hit me. The only way back to my car was through that tunnel. There was no way I was walking back through there, especially since I'd be visible in the darkness. I sat down, weighing my options. I couldn't cross the bridge. A train could come at any moment, and it was too long to risk. I considered calling for help, but who would come? The police were out of the question since I was breaking the law. I had no choice but to pick up a rock and venture into the tunnel. I knew there were at least 2 people inside, but there could have been more. About halfway through, I heard a faint clicking sound, like someone clicking their tongue, but it could have been a machine. I froze, realizing that continuing deeper could be a death sentence. In a moment of desperation, I pulled out my phone and shouted, "You better stay back or I'll shoot." My voice echoed off the walls. Silence followed and the clicking stopped. Bluffing about having a gun felt better than walking in silence. I then played a gunshot sound effect from a YouTube video, turning up the volume. It echoed loudly in the tunnel. Without waiting, I sprinted into the darkness, bracing for confrontation. Miraculously, no one tried to grab me. After emerging from the tunnel, I glanced back and saw a flash from deep within. 2 silhouettes stood on the tracks, facing me. That was it. I turned and jogged away. Just then, a terrifying screech echoed from the tunnel, sounding distinctly human yet primal. I have no plans to train hop again. The New York City subway system can be a frightening place. I've worked as an MTA employee for 7 years, and few things surprise me anymore. However, one story stands out, a chilling experience I still can't explain. About 2 years into my job, I was stationed in Brooklyn, performing routine maintenance at High Street Station. The platform was deserted, a stark contrast to the usual hustle and bustle. I hadn't seen anyone for hours, and the only sounds were the buzzing lights and the occasional passing train. Suddenly, I heard a clang from down the track, startling me so much that I dropped my mop. It sounded like a rock hitting a metal rail. I paused, listening for other noises, but concluded it was likely just an animal or a piece of falling debris. 10 minutes later, the same noise jolted me from my work, this time louder. I began to feel a sense of unease. Was it possible that 2 chunks of the ceiling had fallen in such a short time? I put down my supplies and cautiously approached the tunnel entrance, peering into the darkness. Debating whether to call out, I ultimately decided against it. I still assumed it was nothing, but the second sound had left me puzzled. As I returned to work, trying to shake off the unease, I heard something that sent chills down my spine. A child's voice cried for help from inside the tunnel, sounding distressed. I stopped and walked to the edge of the platform, hesitating before deciding that I couldn't ignore a child in need. I descended the steps onto the tracks and shouted into the tunnel, asking if the child was okay. No response. That was strange. Just then, the voice called out again, repeating its plea for help. I yelled back, asking where he was. He replied, "In front of you. Just keep walking." I hesitated, feeling uneasy. I began to walk forward, but then I asked what was wrong. The child answered, "Just keep walking." That didn't sit right with me. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I could make out what appeared to be the shadow of a child up ahead. But there was also another shadow, much taller, clearly an adult. Panic coursed through me. I turned and hurried back to the platform, relieved that I wasn't chased. The child shouted, "Wait, where are you going?" But I didn't look back. Once I reached the platform, I called the police as soon as I regained cell service. I reported everything, and they arrived within minutes. After about 20 minutes of searching, they found something chilling. A single child's shoe lying in the tunnel, suggesting a struggle. After hours of searching and scouring databases for missing children, we were told we would receive a call if anything came up. It was concluded that whoever had been in the tunnel had hidden away. I'm left wondering what to make of this experience. The best theory I can come up with is that some psycho kidnapped a child and forced him to cry for help to lure a good Samaritan into a trap. Alternatively, perhaps it was their own child, raised to become a psychopath. I can't think of any other reasonable explanation.